the barriers within the region, the whole idea of price, better coordination between private and public actors. Gerhard talked about the whole idea of social movement around innovation, having experimental regionalisation, regionalism. We talked about the thickness of institutions and culture. We talked about in terms of why companies are innovating, that Peter talked about, the drive to innovation, employment opportunities, the capability of the people, all of those so we've gone through an array of sort of topics. I suppose the first question to the panel, and then open it up to you in terms of the audiences, in terms of the question is, does regional innovation systems contribute to sustainable economic growth? So maybe Gerry might kick us off in terms of maybe your perspective on that.
Well, I think we were just actually discussing here, myself and Kieran, the difference between regional innovation systems, which probably Peter's demonstration about the connection between Tuam and Galway showed that we have, to an extent, a regional innovation system. What we probably don't have, I wouldn't want to steal Kieran's point, we don't have a strategy that really underpins that. I think that's the key difference in terms of what we have. We have a lot of engagement and collaboration, which you could find as a system which operates quite effectively. And an awful lot depends upon individual connections, maybe established relationships, person-to-person contacts, and things like that, which is a system that operates on a case-by-case basis quite effectively when it goes well. But it's not really, as I say, we don't have any great strategy surrounding that, by which a region or part of the country could have a much better engagement between the sort of support systems, the industry in the region. I suppose where one might get a better dividend in terms of job creation and economic development for a region. So I suppose that's one of the key issues. And one of the key problems in Ireland for me is that we have traditionally in Ireland, not alone in innovation and in research, but we have a centralised system of governance, we have a centralised mentality, which is entrenched as its foundation of the state. And that has not effectively changed to any massive extent. We saw in the NDP from 2000-2006, there was a very high level policy of balanced regional development, but actually when you read behind it and actually got into the practicalities of how this was going to be implemented, it was ignored to a great extent by the organs of state, particularly at departmental level, which to an extent were charged with trying to implement this policy.
The short answer is yes, of course, regional innovation systems contribute to sustainable economic growth, but even more than that, they contribute to social growth, to cultural growth, to areas beyond the economic. A vibrant regional innovation system has impacts for the education system. It has impacts for surrounding, supporting social strata, and to go and to measure innovation systems solely in economic terms is, I'd argue, not grasping the whole impact or contribution of innovation systems.
Yeah, just a quick observation from my side would be that yes, I suppose the simple answer is yes. However, I would have to go into the question a little bit in terms of what is an innovation system, and I think one could have a lot of different definitions of what the innovation system might be. And my view is that we need to have a very clear understanding of what are the success factors for innovation. We celebrate success, we celebrate growth in companies, growth in employment, growth in these areas. But quite often, even some companies don't quite understand what have been the agents, the catalysts, the factors that have allowed that success and allowed that innovation to foster. And I think if we could begin to look at that in the region, not just within industry sectors, certainly within the business I live and operate in, we try to look outside our industry for common technology building blocks that are in other industries. So it's not just about pillars of individual competencies, it's about networking to understand and pull from other research activities in some sort of a controlled and organised way. So just Just an observation.
Gerhard?
Yeah, okay, well, in my mind, a regional innovation system is an analytical concept, and the regional innovation systems can contribute to sustainable growth, but they also can impede sustainable growth. It pretty much depends on how the system is kind of designed, how it works. So the system context is bringing up the mirror of something that is closed. So a system works to fulfill specific functions, and in order to be able to fulfill these functions, there's something like an aim must be given. So there's closeness, and this closeness can lead to the fact that I misinterpret the environment, or that I do not recognize what's going on in the outside world. So therefore, the system as such also must be open. And there must be something like a combination between being on a certain path where I want to go and a certain openness that makes me reflect all the time, well, I'm on the right path. And systems that are able to do this surely can contribute to sustainable growth.
Thanks very much, Gerhard. So in terms of the issue in terms of the sustainability of regional innovation systems, then I need some perspectives from the audience in terms of our comments, in terms of what you just heard. So.
Well, both begin as Senator Trade Ireland. I'd just like to respond to the last point that was made there. I think the key must be the responsiveness of the systems to the sort of needs that Peter Reilly has outlined in terms of what businesses are going to actually need. I think if you look at, if you're sort of putting together a strategy or institutions around that, I mean, it's the responsiveness of those that will be the kind of the key thing. If you take, for instance, how the work that Kieran outlined earlier this morning, it was about how companies actually network with customers, network with suppliers, network with others to sort of get a sense of the market that they're innovating for. In a sense, people don't just produce products for the sake of producing them. They're producing products or services that they think they or know they can sell. So I think the system itself has to be able to respond to that. And I'd say the same holds true whether it's communities that are innovating as much as companies as well. It's responses to the needs of those communities, what they need creatively, culturally, and socially, as opposed to putting together an institution or a strategy and hoping that will fit.
Yeah, there's a kind of an assumption implicit in the whole discussion that when we talk about regional innovation, that we actually know what the region is or what it should be. Some of the things that I was picking up on was that, we all know that BMW region actually was a mechanism to maximise funding from an EU perspective back in the early days. I don't know what impact that is having in today's level of funding that goes on. But we also heard during some of the conversation about interactions with other regions that are actually outside of the BMW region specifically. We've heard there's a major collaboration between the university here in Galway and the university in Limerick. For example, there's an outreach centre in County Clare and so on and so forth. So my question really is to the panel, what is the region, and should it be the BMW, or is that relevant anymore in today's environment? Should it be broader or smaller than that to take in other areas? And I'm thinking particularly of what Patrick was talking about, Patrick Collins was talking about, in terms of those sort of less tangible kind of things that make a real difference. And is it time to look at this issue again in the context of trying to create a strategy for a region that makes sense? And or does it even matter at the end of the day? Is it only a question of distance that we can collaborate on? I don't know.
Like the short answer from my perspective is your last point, is the important point. I don't think it necessarily has to be a defined geographical entity or space. I think that's a material. We just have to BMW, it could be abolished in the morning, who knows, part of reorganisation. So that's not the point for today's conference. It was just because we've been organising. So it's in a space where people, I suppose, people, whether companies or businesses, can engage constructively and can transfer knowledge and information. And I don't know, we need to get hung up on what that is, to be quite honest. There may be a certain, I think Peter would have, in his presentation, would have outlined, the proximity factor, I think, from the two in Galway, which is important. So to me, that's the key thing. It's where structures, businesses and organisations can collaborate successfully. Now, obviously, from the state policy, there has to be some sort of a defined space in that, but I don't think it's the key point. The key point is how the collaboration can happen. So whether it's NUIG and UL, that's fine. There's a specific interest in that. There is a collaboration that's happening there. That, to an extent, defines that space. Now, you may run into difficulties if you try and strategize that into a concrete document in terms of how you might deliver policy responses, but they're probably surmountable in my view.
Yeah, I suppose related to that is the question of how our innovation system nationally and sub-nationally is managed and steered, if we use the word steered. Because at the moment the only steerage as such is at the national level. The Office of Science and Technology has a fundamental role as part of their role. Is the overall strategy for science, technology and innovation, how that's implemented, and to monitor its implementation at a national level using national benchmarks and indicators and so on. I suppose the question that's being posited here is, you can take out the word regional and just say sub-national. Is there a need for more coordinated steerage, to use that phrase, steering of the way we concentrate our resources, the institutions we set up, the supports that are provided, and there is some choice within the region in terms of how resources are directed and so on. Is that something that would benefit from a sub-national dimension? Whether that's the Western Three Counties or it's Galway City or it's the BMW region, to me isn't that material, because for certain functions maybe the 3 zones might be relevant. But I suppose our thesis, if you want to use that phrase, is that there's only steering happening at one spatial level, and at sub-level we believe, because industries are different, institutions are different, needs are different, sectors are different, perhaps there's a need for a more deliberative process to be created. And it's not about a strategy as a document at the end of the day, it's mostly about the engagement, the interaction, the networking, such as education provided to business leaders, public policy, the state support agencies and so on. Eventually that work in a more collaborative way that delivers outputs that people choose should be the outputs for our sub-national area.
Great, Kieran. So this is the other sort of issue that we're looking at, looking at the tension between the national innovation system, the and the regional innovation system, and how it can be leveraged to maximise potential for the region. So, Gerhard, you might have a perspective on that, the tension between your national policies at a national level, and then how you can leverage that in a regional sense.
Just going back to this question before, I think a regional innovation system consists of actors interacting within a given space. And some interactions might be space-bound, others might be not. So if I take up, sorry for this, but if I take up the example of Baden-Württemberg, so for example, this whole system of technology transfer institution is space-bound because it's been created by the state of Baden-Württemberg, and if you move outside of Baden-Württemberg, it's not existent. There are different schemes maybe, but the specific type of technology transfer, the Steinbeis and these universities of applied sciences, is a typical Baden-Württemberg matter. So if you would say, are we talking about the region, what can the region do, what is specific to the region? It is a specific type of interactions that can only happen in the region. It's different, of course, with companies, because companies, as we refer all the time, cannot. A lot of companies cannot only concentrate on the local market. They have different affiliations, and for them, the orientation towards the region is depending on the specific type of interaction the region can offer. And of course, then it makes only sense to give a regional system of innovations if there is a significant amount of interactions that are regionally bound. So without any doubt, there are spaces, areas that cannot offer much. The region doesn't play a significant role because there is a specific there what they can offer. To the other retrospect to the national and the state, I mean, the situation in Germany is different because we have a relatively big amount of state autonomy in this respect, and the question would rather be, what's the relationship between the Baden-Württemberg government and regions? And the Baden-Württemberg government, maybe unfortunately, since the second half of the 90s, has given up the idea of making strict guidelines. Up to the late 90s, there was the idea that the state government has something like a guiding function. But this has been given up, and since then, the regions can pretty much decide by themselves what they want to do. So there's a cluster document by the state government, but it's not binding for the regions. So if the regions want to take up something like a cluster policy, they can do this, but they must not do this. Therefore, it's not a conflict between what is more or less dependent on what the actors on a specific level actually do.
But having that sort of flexibility from a sort of regional perspective in terms of being more responsive to sort of regional needs is, from your perspective and from your research, is that sort of critical element that you have this responsiveness to sort of what Peter talked about, the business needs, the drivers of innovation, that that flexibility is important from a sort of regional innovation sort of perspective.
I mean, going back also to this responsiveness issue, I mean, the big question is, who are you going to involve in the further development of your regional system of innovation? That's a big issue. Traditionally, in the past, the state government tried to fulfill the role of opening up the arena. So you have to think beyond what is there at the moment, try to think about new options. So there is a problem if you stay very much oriented to your specific regional situation, that you lose this broader horizon. Because you have some important actors there who are doing well at the moment, who are satisfied, and it's difficult to convince them that they should act otherwise, even if there could be enough reasons. So, as I mentioned, Baden-Württemberg has a lot of examples for communities going down. I mean, they were responsive to their customers, but both the customers and the market disappeared. And for whatever reason, they didn't notice this. Quite enough so. It's a difficult situation.
Peter, in terms of the potentially or leveraging international innovations, regional innovation systems, how can you maximise the benefits of the region?
I think Ireland is still a small place relative to Germany and other countries, and sometimes I think we think maybe too small, and we're constrained by the provinces almost. I actually don't think it makes that much difference. I think what's important is, of course, there's regional interests, and it's up to the communities and the industrial leaders and educational leaders and the question is actually who, I'm just throwing out a handful, to demonstrate passion, leadership and an interest in developing that region. Someone earlier mentioned that the Taoiseach, the Taoiseach and our President are all from the BMW region. I understand all three are graduates of NUIG. Well, if that's not a network we should be exploiting, then we've missed a trick. And I think these are the type of things that we have to do. I wouldn't be too pushed about geography so much. I think in certain aspects we can be regional down to club level in the GAA or down to county level, to use a sporting analogy. In other aspects we should work as a team, as a country, for the betterment of all regions, keeping in mind there's a competition for resources in finance, resources in people, resources in lots of different areas. And we have to play to our strengths depending on what we're facing.
Yeah, just briefly, and I suppose kind of the key word, and I think Kieran mentioned it, is function. For me, it's functionality that really defines a region. And that is a set of places with which the interactions are many and viable. Just on the idea of the subnational, well, I think it was already mentioned earlier on today that Europe is a collection of regions as much, if not more, than it is a connection of nations. And I think that applies to Ireland as well. You can look at many aspects of the economy, and you can separate the the Western region from the national region and see very different trends. So for that very reason, I think innovation systems on the level of the region are the most appropriate in that sense.
Gerry, you want to comment in terms of the tension or the challenges that's posed?
Well, I mean, there are significant challenges posed. Obviously, like I come from a gender where we're in favour of the regional approach. We don't think it replaces the national approach, I suppose, because obviously Ireland is a small country, that's the reality. But there are certain strengths that each region has, and I think one could be more smart or more in terms of how you implement some of your research and innovation policies, which I think will pay dividends towards the strengths of the various different regions. I mean, I can recall one time a good example. I think it was in research in the agricultural area, where there's a number of years ago, where in the general research area, it was excellence was the sole criteria. There's nothing particularly wrong with that because excellence is a prerequisite of all researchers. But in one of the agricultural areas, it was if you could collaborate with the research institute in the objective one region, which was another region, it scored somewhat extra in one of the research areas in terms of the scoring mechanism. Now, it was an early encouragement, but it was a smart encouragement as well, because it sort of rewarded collaboration with the weaker part in terms of research funding in the country. The other problem is why we need some sort of element of a regional approach, and there's a complete element of self-interest in this, but research funding will tend to follow the main research institutes, therefore of its nature will migrate towards the greater Dublin region. That's the natural course, because that's where the major research institutes are. The consequence for that is that it's going to be more difficult for funding to come into this part of the region. And there are very logical consequences to that. I mean, businesses reside here because it's not because they like us, it's because they see an added advantage in being here and staying here. And that means if we can't leverage research funding to stay, they will migrate gradually over the years. So there is a very important and self-interested reason that it should be here, because there's a lot of other associated things that are contingent on that. So that's why a nuanced approach that doesn't sort of that splits the cake in a more not in a more practical way, but in a smarter way, can pay dividends for the region, but also for the state.
So just maybe opening that up again in terms of yourselves, in terms of different maybe perspectives or comments. And
Porrick Fogarty, I'm involved in a personal capacity in Galway 2040 and also in another project with a group of engineers, and we've produced a report earlier this year, Engineering the West to 2020, reinventing our region. And I believe very strongly in the importance of the regional approach to innovation. But I must confess, a bit like the gentleman from Enterprise Ireland, that I have some difficulty in relating to the BMW as a region, and I think it is an artificial construct, and I think it's difficult to see innovation in that space. And particularly if you look at, say, Galway and Louth, and there is, I think, zero connection between the two locations, other than that our county manager was formerly county manager of Louth. But the connection between Louth is with Dublin and not, I think, with Galway. And I think that's a challenge that we need to face up to if we're to look at innovation in the BMW region, is to make sense of that.
thank you.
Yeah, I want to challenge the innovation system. And, it's something that's thrown around in a very abstract way, as if this is something that in some way can cure all ills if we could only get it to work. But in fact, the reality is in the nuts and bolts of that system. And, as somebody said earlier there, it's interaction between the actors. And, it's the diffusion of knowledge, of science, technology, and how that's done. And I just wonder if we are getting the most of our higher education institutions, and if the functioning of the higher education institutions are as responsive to the needs of business as it it should be or could be. And you know, there are people who would say, well, that's not the role of higher education institutions at all. I happen to believe that it does have a very important role to play. And I just wonder the extent to which the individuals within the institutions who do have something to offer to business, the extent to which they are encouraged to offer that. I think perhaps maybe too much of the links between business between the university and business is at a formal level or at the institutional level rather than between the individuals and business. And then the question is, to what extent are individuals encouraged to do this? Is there any private incentive for the individual at the institutional level to engage with industry? And hearing Kieran this morning saying, you know, in his report that there was an implicit criticism there of the institutions, the responsiveness of the institutions, the slowness of the institutions, the incompatibilities and so on. Is he talking about at the formal level or the interinstitutional level, or is it at the individual level? And I just think that I would like to hear maybe more about Steinbeiss, because I'm a company here in Galway, we've actually worked with Steinbeiss, an entity within Steinbeiss. And that seems a very interesting institution which encourages individuals at the university to engage with business. And perhaps Mr. Fuchs would like to say something about it, because he has mentioned it a few times without saying exactly what it is. I would like him perhaps to explain a little bit what it is, and maybe that sort of model is one that would be more productive to the region in terms of this diffusion of knowledge from the higher education institutions to industry within the region.
That's fine. There's one more. Yes.
Sorry, my name is Gerhard Fuchs. I actually work with the Higher Education Authority, and when we talk about innovation, we talk about investment, and when we talk about investment, it means money. And we have invested in, under PRTI, the best part of $1 billion over the last number of years, and it's been extremely successful. I mean, on a positive news story, I mean, the third level institutions, universities and the IITs, I think in 2010 had a research income of about 450 million, which is not an insubstantial amount of money, including a lot of FP7 money. But the concern that I would have, I mean, Peter referred earlier to ERCSET, which is a council within the HEA, and the success of the MBARC EPS system. The concern that I would have is that the government is now looking at a 4-year plan, and Michael Newlan's already referred to the fact that the low-lying fruit is gone. I think at this stage we're probably putting into the bark of the tree. I just wonder if they're looking for cuts, that they start to look at cutting into the research budget and what impact that will have, not alone on researchers in university who don't have security of tenure, but also the perception from multinational operations. It may not need to be a huge amount of money, it's just a cut is a cut, and the perception that gives. So that would be the concern that I would have. We can talk about national and regional and subnational, whatever else, but at the end of the day, innovation depends quite a lot on the people, and to train people needs money, and to have that investment, a lot of it is actually government investment, so that's a question that I would have.
Okay. Maybe we start with that and then look at the mutual comprehension between the academic community and business, the business side, and then looking at the whole notion of, potential network between Galway and Galway and all of that. So who wants to take the last question around in terms of HE, PRTI, production in terms of research?
A quick comment on that. I mean, the impacts of the cutting of the research funding for the next few years, I think, will be pretty obvious. And foremost in my mind is an article that was written in the journal Nature. I don't know if you're aware of it. It's published in August. It's published by two academics who are located, have affiliation at universities in the United States. Both of whom had worked in Ireland under the SFI, and article went something along the lines of beware of the Irish knowledge economy. Such was the short-termism under which both these researchers were employed. And I think that's a serious, very serious issue, and something that is a necessary case to be made to the government and to Michael Noonan in terms of the cutting of research funding is going to obviously have a severe impact on any strategy regarding the knowledge economy and the smart economy, something that Ireland has been working on and trying to create the image of for the last 15 odd years.
The issue of sort of mutual incomprehension and the whole idea of networking within the region, the artificial nature of it. So, sure.
Yeah, I thought I'd put that debate earlier on, but I'm going to go around too now. Again, I sort of repeat what I said. I don't think that's the point, really. I mean, the BMW, you're right, is an artificial construct. It was basically there to maintain Objective 1 status, which, by the way, had significant financial implications for the country in terms of increased EU funding. And you're right, like Cloud is in the Dublin-Belfast corridor economic sphere. That's true too. Again, the point really about what we'll be making about regional innovations goes back to the point I made early on. It doesn't necessarily have to be a defined geographical or regional space. You know, it depends. It's an interaction between people and institutions. So it can be at different levels. I think it's our main thesis. I think our argument today, like, is that there needs to be a sub-national level within which the assets and the advantages of various parts of the region, I suppose, can be best expressed through a type of regional approach, and that will still remain our case. We don't need to get obsessed so much with this geographical space, because I think it doesn't matter what space you have, there will always be something that isn't particularly right with that, because it's different. It depends on where you come from and what organisation. If you're a company, it's one thing. If you're a community, it's another. If you're a sporting organisation, it's another. If you're a health group, it's another. You know, there are so many different constructs. Just in relation to funding, for my own personal view is everything is up for grabs now at the moment. You know, there is less money and there's all sorts of interest groups and all that, you know, making case for it. So the research people and institutions have to make their relevant case. It strikes me like is that, you know, one is going to have to justify more and more now the relevance of research, the potential commercialisation of research. What is the state getting for the investment in it? Unless you can produce those hard facts, you know, and that's what that becomes really. So those reviews of PRTI that they will produce tangible benefits become more and more relevant as over the next few years, if we are to obtain that sort of consistent level, and that obviously has practical implications at third level institutes and colleges.
Peter, just in terms of the whole, you know, you have an association with the Galway and since 1999 in terms of the interactions and the challenges there, you know, in terms of what Michael has been talking about in terms of maybe mutual incomprehension and the slow and fast speeds of maybe more slower in terms of university, in terms of its interaction, and business need is more urgent. So it's always a perennial sort of challenging issue.
It's also a tricky question.
Yes, absolutely. You've a tricky one to last, yes.
Thank you very much. Well, my experience has been, the experience of the company has been overall very positive. But I know from my own networking with other colleagues in the region and indeed that dealings with other universities in Ireland, that is certainly not the universal case. I think one of the key ingredients is really the motivation and appetite of the university individuals, not the institution itself, not the top level, not the brand, but the actual academic in whatever area of the industry they're in. And I have a view that the first and primary function of a university is to educate people and to prepare people for life, prepare people for work, prepare people for industry, or to join academic or whatever line of career that they choose. And there's a fine balance between the work that goes on in industry is about success, it's about profit, it's about commercial things. the work that goes on in university, in my view, that should not be their primary business. We as individuals and as a society pay our taxes to government, and universities go out and work hard to get philanthropic contributions to run those universities. And that's very important. And I think if we have the right balance and everybody focuses on what their strengths are and what their core business is, then the collaboration can be very, very successful, because everybody knows their roles and responsibilities, knows their boundaries, and can get on with it. My colleague, Dr. Martin Lavin from the CAR Institute is in the audience. I don't want to put you on the spot, Martin, but if you wanted to share your own feedback, I'm quite happy for you to do so, as someone who is an academic and is working in the university here and has had collaboration with industry, I know, very successfully for over a decade. It might be interesting to get the other side of the perspective.
Yeah, as Peter said, we've been working with television systems for about, I think it's around 12 years now since we first met Peter. And we've been very successful in terms of leveraging funding from Enterprise Ireland through ERCSET, and even more recently some direct funding from television systems. And I think they've seen some value in the work that we do. From our perspective, it gives real focus to the work that we do, the fact that we have a company, we're making real products, and those products they're things that people want. And when we do some research, we know that we're making a very real change in the world. The products that could potentially save lives, and that generates a kind of a motivation that kind of spirals itself, feeds and builds on itself. Also added to that, the researchers are very focused on the fact that they're working with a real company, that there's a real, sometimes blue sky research can be a little bit tougher to maybe motivate yourself, whereas if there's a real product at the end of the day, you really, there's a very tangible kind of evaluation of the work that you do. They also love the fact that they meet with people from the company on a very regular basis. So the structures that we've set up, we've worked on, we've made a lot of mistakes, we've fixed those mistakes, and we have recently developed a research framework agreement which allows for a kind of an orderly transition from the laboratory at the university to the, I suppose, ultimately to the production line in the company. And a lot of it is built on that trust that Peter talked about. I know the guys in June trust us very much. I know we trust them to do the right thing by us, and they're doing that on a daily basis. We have some structures where the company have, one of the first guys that came from our group is now, one of the guys that Peter referred to, is now in a position of some influence within the company, and he works with us on a regular basis, and the company have set aside some resources, some of his time to work with us, and that means an awful lot, because it also means that the people who work with us, they have a direct link within the company itself. So I think what we have developed is a model for working with industry that really motivates everybody on both sides. The guys know that they have a very high potential for a job when they graduate, and they know that if for some reason the Vallejo are not the people who are interested in taking them on, that they have a set of transferable skills, and they have a confidence because they've worked with industry very closely, and they can go in and they can bring that confidence and that experience to bear on pretty much any job or any industry that my find themselves working in. So it's been hugely successful, and we really look forward to further growth in the future. And I'm very happy to see a €250 million 2015 figure that Peter put up. So hopefully the CAR group will grow, and hopefully we can come back in a few more years and talk about maybe the CAR Research Centre or more.
On that very, very positive note, I think I'll draw close to the panel session in terms of time as beaten us. I would really like to thank all our panellists, Gerry, Kieran, Pat, Peter and Gerhard. I've such a small present for both Gerhard and Peter, just to say